So I truly like, I'm excited for a world where I have like a personal sort of omniscient being all around me, like a combination of a higher deity and a mother and a, like all of those things are like right by my side at all times. That's
Wow.
great.
Very, very optimistic
A
take. I
higher
love that.
deity, huh? Worshipable AI.
Today, we're speaking with Jesika Haria, who works at Glean on structured data initiatives. She previously founded Logic Loop and was a founding engineer at Instabase, a product that helps Fortune 100s save millions by putting artificial intelligence to work. We chatted with her about her founder journey and her thoughts on the future of AI. Enjoy.
We had a daughter now 11 months ago.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Congrats.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah. That's
Thank
cool.
you.
Are you through the like bad sleep phase and everything, or you feel like you've gotten settled in a little?
I want to jinx it, but,
Oh yeah.
she's been a relatively good sleeper since she was about 4 months old. There's obviously like bad days. And we went to India for a month where obviously everything was like exactly the reverse in terms of circadian rhythm.
Yeah.
But she's been okay. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I have experienced that very, very. I mean, I went with my 2-year-old to India last year, and it was like total flip for the whole time, basically. And I didn't take my wife, Anjali, didn't come with us, so it was like she was both flipped and also like missing mom. Like, this is
Oh
bad.
my God.
But actually, it settled in, and my sister lives there, so her cousins are there and everything. So it
Oh, yeah.
ended up settling down a lot. But in the beginning, it was just like so tough. Yeah.
I bet that's very bold of you. I traveled with her myself on the flights too, but it was like she didn't have time to miss her dad when she was without her because so
Yeah.
many other people. But I feel like mom's so special.
Yeah, that's true. But on the plane, I'm like full screen time, do whatever you want. There's no restriction on the plane. And so she's like Boss Baby. That's her favorite movie on the plane. She never watches it ever again, only on the plane. She thinks it's like a plane movie.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yes. So Jessica, we met a little while ago at this point. I think you had started Logic Loop, and your co-founder and I had overlapped at Stripe, and we were introduced through that. And I guess like since then, you've gone on to the company got acquired, which is super, super cool and exciting. And you're now at Glean. And so I guess I just wanted to, just from shifting gears a little bit from some of the personal stuff we're talking about, I just wanted to hear a little bit about the origin story. Like I know you were at MIT. It sounds like pretty soon after that you decided to found a company. Like, can you take us through that origin story and sort of the journey you went through there?
Yeah. So I was born and brought up in Bombay. So that's, if you want to go way back there, that's sort of where I still feel like it's home for me in many ways, of course, as is the Bay Area now. In growing up, I was always very interested in math and science, but also literally everything else. So like calligraphy, horseback riding, art, scuba diving, like, literally all those things. I was like, if there was a Renaissance child, that was me. And I wasn't sure initially, actually, if I would even apply to MIT because not a lot of people not a lot of people go to college outside of their home country, at least in the circles that I was in. And then on top of that, MIT was this like unattainable sort of absolute dream school. And we only had 8 schools we could apply to. So it's like, oh, should I, apply to like my safety schools or like the other schools? Should I apply to MIT?
8 total schools? Like that was a high school restriction?
Yeah, that was a high school restriction.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Not just international, but across the board, 8 schools.
So I did IB, which is the International Baccalaureate. So I was only applying to places outside of the country, but this included, the UK and like all the like worldwide, yeah. But by happenstance, I got accepted, and it was this like magical moment come true. And then while at MIT, I was like, okay, I have to make all of my dreams come true in these 4 years. So I actually applied for chemical engineering, and I wanted to do material science because similar sort of concepts. And then I fell into computer science because MIT has a very robust undergrad research program. We can definitely go more into, that as well. But
Well, actually, just to pause there, that's really interesting because at least in your early background, you and Arvind share some common interests, I think.
Yeah. I
Because
was also material science MIT masters. So course 3 masters. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was, I went to Berkeley for undergrad too. I think you went to Haas later, right?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Well, that was just like a short program. But
We
yeah,
kind of traded places though. Yeah.
it's amazing.
But I stuck with the material science, critical. No, just joking.
That's right.
Oh, sometimes I'm like, man, I should have studied computer science. What a mistake.
It's overrated. And like, you can learn all of the same things, now online.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that, but I've definitely tried, and I'm like, man, this hill is still too steep for me to climb.
It's so interesting because I felt that way when I got to college, right? Because you think about the kind of person that goes to MIT and then studies computer science. They've been coding since they were 5, right?
a lot of them, yeah, that's true.
Right. So to climb that hill definitely felt steep at the time, but the earlier in your life you climb hills, the like smaller they are.
Did you like it? Did you like MIT and Boston?
I loved the culture of MIT because, your problem sets were designed so that you couldn't do them yourself. So you had to collaborate with other people, which I really liked coming from India and sort of a competitive high school. It was just so different. And the other thing was that no matter who you were accepted. You're never too weird for MIT, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So I think those things really appealed to me. What I hated was the winters. I just could not stand
Rough,
those.
especially coming from India, like the climate, and then going to, I felt that for sure.
Yeah, I didn't own a single full sleeve T-shirt before coming to MIT. It was just not necessary in Bombay.
So when you left MIT, were you like, I need to find somewhere warmer?
That's right. Yeah. And also like 40% of a class was, did computer science, and then a good chunk of them, migrated west. So it was sort of a no-brainer. And then my boyfriend at the time, now husband, he graduated early to do a startup. So he was doing a startup and he's like, Dad, can I drop out of school? And it's like, nope, finish your degree. So he just graduated early and then moved out west. Yeah.
So what did you decide to do post MIT? Like, how did you make the transition to starting something yourself?
Yeah, so there were 2 other sort of experiences I had before starting a company. The first job that I had out of college was actually at a research startup that came out of Stanford and Berkeley labs, and that we were building data transformation software in the heydays of Hadoop and big data stuff, all sort of like throwback buzzwords. That I was really interested in continuing some of that research DNA that we had at MIT. So joined them. And then
back then the buzzwords were big data analytics.
Yes.
That was everyone on the tip of everyone's tongue. Oh, is it big data or is it
This is your sales pitch for me.
Is it small data or is it big data?
Exactly.
How big is your data? Yeah.
Exactly. How big is your data? Like my personal tagline was making big data feel small. Like I was so passionate about that.
That's nice.
But yeah, and it's funny because while I was at that job, one of the research projects that I'd worked on at MIT at CSAIL, which is a computer science and artificial intelligence lab, actually turned into a company. So I joined them as a founding engineer. So the first experience I had was like 30 people. I joined them at employee number 34. The second experience, I joined them at employee number 5, and then saw that like crazy startup growth journey while at Instabase. And then as Instabase became big, I was like, now I got to go back and go back to my startup roots. And that's kind of what led me to founding a company. So if you plot the chart of 35-5, like tends to 1 or 0, that's kind of how I ended up founding a company.
So when you leave Instabase and are you incubating the idea while, in your head, kind of while you're still there? Was it a need you noticed that you had even at Instabase when you were working with other companies? How did you think of what you wanted to work on?
Yeah. So this was back, COVID times. Again, another throwback. I was working with a Fortune 100 customer, a very large bank. And if you remember, there were these PPP loans that were sort of all over. A lot of small businesses were really badly impacted by COVID. But the way the government went about these loans was basically they had to do a lot of things very quickly and not basically bypass some of the checks that you would otherwise do when applying for and getting a loan, which meant a ton of fraud. So these large banks were just absolutely slammed with fraudulent applications. And I think now there's been studies where up to like 90% of the fraud of the applications that banks got back then were actually deemed fraudulent. So we were dealing.
At least it was real humans doing it, probably. In the future,
back then.
In the future, going to be just like a bunch of bots.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. So, and these banks were still just not capable of dealing with the new volume of applications and then like being able to find the like fraudulent ones. And I remember there was this one time where we wanted to change like a threshold of like, if someone has an income over $10,000, something like that, right? To $20,000. And that took us a week to do. And, you know, this is like you're losing millions of dollars an hour as a bank, and it would take you a week to, you know, change things like that. And this wasn't just them, right? It was like something that you can imagine that exists in other places as well. It's like, okay, this is a problem. And this is a problem not just because the banks are losing money, but that like, you know, Americans aren't getting, like the deserving Americans aren't getting the money that they need. And I started actually asking around for how some of my other friends have solved these kinds of problems where they, you know, there's a loan application, there's a few rules that you have to, you know, pass validation checks. If something like that needs to change, if business logic needs to change, what do you do? And that set off a whole series of conversations during the course of which I actually met Jackie, my co-founder, who you know, you worked with at Stripe. And they had built some really cool internal tooling to sort of help solve their own problems. So very loosely sort of inspired by the kinds of things that Stripe and then Uber, Airbnb, everyone had sort of built a version of this kind of internal tool that just did an if this, then that. You know, if you're Airbnb, if there's a room in San Francisco listed for under $75 a night, flag it to someone, right? Those are the kinds of things that someone who's very close to the operations needs to be able to do at the data layer. And we kind of felt like there were two different worlds. There's like the operations people that were, you know, adjudicating a lot of these cases on a case by case basis, and then the analytics people. And they just belonged to two different worlds. They never they collaborated, but there's always a big backlog. And that's how we started thinking about like, how can we bring the power of data to operations people? How can we help them set up these alerts and automations across all of their data? It was nice because I'd seen a lot of the problems and Jackie had seen a lot of the ways people would solve them. So it felt like a nice lock and key.
That's amazing. We had our other friend, Karthik Chandran, on yet to be released pod. By the time people hear this, it would have been released. But he was telling us about his co-founder journey, how he met his co-founder. And I guess there's a Y Combinator app that you can use that's like almost like a dating app where you can find co-founders. This seems a lot more organic and, I don't know, old school way of meeting a co-founder, which I actually appreciate.
It was through mutual friends, so about as old school as you can get. But we did actually go through, there was this great first round article about like 50 questions to ask a potential co-founder. I can send it to you later, but we made a version of that for ourselves because I still didn't know my co-founder, although there was a lot of social.
So you guys, now you have this idea, you found your co-founder. How did you like hold hands, take the jump to leave your companies? And then what was the next step? Did you try to go raise a little bit of seed capital somewhere? Did you apply to a bunch of incubators? Like, what'd you do to get it off the ground?
Yeah, so the first thing we did was an insane number of user research interviews. So those are the kinds of things you could do, especially in COVID, right? You know, everyone's remote anyway. So I think we did like 150 interviews, because we were trying to figure out exactly, you know, what the problem. We had a hunch that
how long did it take you to do that number of interviews?
This was over a few months, and there was definitely a lot of like divide and conquer. And the way we sourced all of these were just, if I had a conversation with you in the last 5 years that lasted more than 10 minutes, I was reaching out to you.
It's kind of like starting a podcast, honestly.
Yeah, it's kind of what we're doing.
Yeah.
That's right. But you have to do, you just have to do it. I think a lot of times, like, I feel like a lot of like the best strategy is just brute force. Before you like have a fine-tuned tool, you just like blunt force it. And yeah, not all of these were very useful, but that's kind of how we started. It took us a few months. We finally did sort of a comparative landing page on 2 product ideas that we had, and then ended up picking one of the 2 that, whatever, they looked a little bit better in initial testing. We also had this email list of just supporters that were just generally interested in the kinds of things we were doing. So they'd give us a lot of feedback informally. Some of them ended up becoming angel investors in our company as well. I think there's this underappreciated fact that a lot of people care about you and want you to do well. So if you're, doing something new, they're excited to support you. So we kind of didn't realize that before we actually tried to do it ourselves. So we had that. And then through some of this, we actually ended up, I had already quit my job, as had Jackie was actually the previous company. So this was company number 2 for her. And I think she had already left at the time for medical reasons. And so we were sort of doing this foolish time while also trying to enjoy whatever time we had in between things. It's sort of a weird, not that much structure in your day, but just a ton of interviews. And then March of 2021 is when we raised VC money. And so we raised from first round in Excel, and also people that Jackie had known from Stripe. So there was Mecca Asani from first round, and then Amy Saper from Excel. So we sort of...
She's now at Uncorked or different...
Yeah,
some different
yeah, she's at
now.
Uncorked. Yeah. And both are just such fantastic people. And again, there was a lot of social proof because they'd worked with the same people that we worked with before. And that whole week, I had more than 40 conversations in that 1 week, but a whole fundraise was done in a week. This was those were the days where that could even happen.
Yeah, things have changed so much in 3 years now.
Yeah,
I feel maybe if you're in a specific type of space, maybe that's still the case. But I think in a lot of areas, that's not what people are seeing.
Yeah.
So what did you guys put the money to do? Did you try to grow your people base and try to grow faster as a company in terms of your employees putting things out, or did you try to get one product out and kind of distribute it to the market? What'd you do next?
Yeah, so we had to have a certain minimum number of people to sort of build the product out. The first thing that anyone does, I think, with VC money is hire engineers. So that's what we went and did. We found some sort of early engineers, built the product, and then after that, you don't need a ton of stuff beyond just your first few engineers and the founders to validate, something that works. And neither of us actually came from a go-to-market background. So there was a healthy amount of us just learning how to do marketing, how to do top of funnel, how to get leads. There's a ton of stuff there which is a lot of ground to cover from an internal knowledge perspective that wasn't just about the product. And so we went back to all the research conversations we had, tried to basically go the next level deeper. And then we actually have a few design partners that we were working with and sort of building the product out. It took about, I'd say, half a year to have a product that we felt would actually bear the weight of having your company's thought processes run through them. And that was just one vertical. So we always wanted it to be a horizontal product, for better or for worse. And so sort of from there, we realized there's other use cases. And the first few customers came from, again, people we knew, Twitter, cold outbounds, cold inbounds. It was sort of a really big variance in sort of where we saw the best sort of initial sales happen.
Next time we have go-to-market issues, you need to call Vivek Ramani LLC, consulting firm.
Well, now I have an advisory business. Back then, I think Jesika and I talked about potentially a role, but I was deep into Notion at that point. And I was like a year or two into Notion, and I was like, okay, I want to see this to at least get my full vest in or whatever. But yeah, I think it's been a wild journey. I've been doing the sales advisory thing for the last year or so, and even though it's it's a problem space that's very much in my wheelhouse. Every founder that I talk to has a different set of knowledge that I need to complement. So it's pretty unique. It's been fun watching that and seeing how it works. But yeah, I think the early days go-to-market stuff is always very fascinating. And I always enjoy talking to founders in that stage because there's so much that a lot of times technical co-founders will just have blind spots on because they're focused on the technology side of things. And it's nice to have someone who sort of has been there before and done it to kind of validate. And I'm sure similar to how you went to validate the product on the go-to-market side, I'm sure you did some speed learning on how to run things.
Yeah. Vivek, I'm curious, are there things that you see technical founders, like the top 3 mistakes you see, or not 3 mistakes, but the top 3 things you would encourage them to think about?
Yeah, from a go-to-market standpoint. I think so I think that you have to completely, like you were talking about, on the product side, finding those people, like anyone who you even had a 10-minute conversation to talk to, you have to leverage your network really hard in the first little while to get to that first 10, 15 customers. And one mistake that I've seen that people make is they try to hire someone to do go-to-market or sales too quickly because, I think like and again, this is very much in the circle of competence of my own circle of competence in software sales, SaaS, fintech, now kind of AI products, whatever you want to call it. In that realm, it's like you have to be able to just get to your first 10 or 15 customers by yourself and figure out what does the sales process even look like? Because if you don't figure that out, or at least a semblance of it, you won't target the right people to do the sale. Right? Like you won't know the skill set that you need and whether the product is like a product-led growth product or if it's a, cold outbound, like large enterprise sale product or something in between, which is what a lot of the companies that I've been at have been kind of something in between. Right. So it's like figuring out the nuance is quite important. So that's one thing. That could be multiple things, but yeah, that's probably the biggest one for early founders is learn how to sell. It'll help you in every aspect of your business.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very true. Yeah, certainly we made a lot of the mistakes that you were talking about. But it's so important. I feel like it's probably important for any technical person to learn how to sell, whether or not they intend to be a founder, because you're selling a lot more than you realize you are.
What I'm constantly, I don't know if you call it upset about, but the thing that I really get in my own head about a lot is like, technical founders can learn how to sell, but it's really fucking hard for like a salesperson to go learn how to be a badass like at coding. Like that's really fucking hard. And
now
it's even actually it's easier now in terms of like being able to like learn.
Did the journey continue like as you were expecting through the company's growth, or were there a lot of road bumps and things you needed to work around?
Yeah, I think in general, you hear of the like VC backed company that just, raises one round after another, like every 6 months. That's like one prototype. And then there's something sort of like, you crash and burn, you pivot every week, and you basically aren't seeing any sort of stickiness with your product. So those are the 2 extremes, if I'm thinking about this as a spectrum. I think we were solidly somewhere in between which could be, again, a good and a bad thing, where the kinds of people that we spoke to with some probability convert. So from a sales perspective, we, at least for the first 2 years, had some idea of, if I talk to someone, what the probability of them converting is based off of like the factors that were true for them at their company. What happened later is that a lot of the world around us changed very rapidly. And then, we weren't able to figure out what that like meant in the new world. And then customer success was something that shockingly, I shouldn't be this surprised, really, but it was better than expected. We had more attention. We had like consistent upsells, all of those things. But our biggest sort of hiccup was top of funnel. So like sales was as expected, customer success better than expected. And then top of funnel was sort of like worse than expected for us, because after we ran through the set of people that we know and the people that they know, there was this point where we weren't quite sure how to get to the people that hadn't heard about us without doing a ton of performance marketing and all this stuff that, again, is a whole level of like technical sort of field in its own right. And unlike consumer products, there wasn't an inherent virality within the product, So it was true for within a company. And a lot of the ways that we'd get new customers is if one of our champions left and went to a new company, they'd take us with them, which was, again, speaking to the retention piece. But those were the things that we had to be really creative around, because I think in this world, if you have an idea that's like be standard from a growth perspective, it's just not going to work. It's going to work if you have a very like defined term and a defined space you play in. But we were in some ways creating a line item, not replacing one. So that was another thing that was really challenging for us from a top of funnel perspective. But, a lot of brainstorming there. And then I'd say the other pieces were around just like the aspect of building a team. It's both more rewarding and, you have to do it a lot more carefully at your own company than ever before. So we certainly like made mistakes and learned from them even there. But I'd say those are the types of like challenges we ran into or learnings.
And y'all were in market for a few years, and then eventually it sounds like you were acquired. And so maybe walk us through that journey a little bit, because you've created this baby, you have done all this work and all that stuff. Like how did everything transpire, and how did that feel, and how did you go through it?
Yeah. So we always had a team that was pretty tight and small. And we were very careful about not expanding when we didn't think that would solve the bottleneck that we currently had in front of us from a team's perspective. So at some point we, had like a steady base of customers that were growing sort of in an okay way. And then started seeing a few inbounds. At the same time, this whole like AI thing was blowing around us, and I had a baby, so I got a few weeks off to just like zoom out and think about the world, and realized, hey, our time is really valuable. We have to do something that we think will affect the most number of customers that we can with the talents and the hard work that everyone on the team has. Then we started kind of trying to figure out like how do we basically scale our impact. We were sort of a solid business. It might have actually been like a great like lifestyle business for us to continue working on with the sort of in and out flow of money that we had. And we had multi-year runway left as well. So it was actually not about the runway. It was a lot of it stemmed from like, we need to be doing more. So we started exploring avenues to do more, to scale our impact. A lot of that, our first sort of stop was partnerships. Partnerships is sort of this double-edged sword. It sounds great in theory. In practice, there's a lot of hurdles that one has to cross. And we, at that time, started seeing some inbounds from larger companies that could have been customers of ours, but had built internal tools. And they sort of wanted to like fit us into their internal tool sort of roadmap, which was one bucket of companies. So these are like large fintechs that have the problems that we were trying to solve, or large just general companies that basically needed more operations automation. And then there was this like set of blue chip companies that are just growing really quickly and want smart teams. And those would have been more the acqui-hire route. But we weren't, we entertained those, but we weren't like super interested in that. We were just like curious to hear what these companies were doing. Almost all of them were seeding AI teams and needed like a group of people that have worked well together, and to help seed some of those teams. And then there were a set of just like other startups and companies that were just more directly AI related, AI first. Maybe most of them were started in the last like 18 to 24 months, some a little bit older. So those are the kinds of companies that we started talking to. Both from like a product perspective and from a people perspective. Turns out, and at the same time, of course, we had to tell our customers, hey, we're planning to like make major changes at Logic Loop. The safest thing to do is actually like look for alternatives in case there's like things that we can do. And like for all these customers, some of them, public companies that like rely very heavily on our processes, and we couldn't tell them the last day something changes. There's like plenty of companies where, that's happened to us as well, where like a company just like a vendor of ours just goes under. We didn't want that to be the experience for our customers. And then funnily enough, one of our customers who was a public company posted in the Slack group that we had created. So we had a Slack group of 800 fraud and risk professionals. they would just exchange ideas, because as we were talking to all these people, we're like, hey, they don't want to talk to me as much as they want to talk to someone else that looks like them. And someone posted there saying that, hey, we haven't been able to find a logic loop alternative. Do you have ideas? And one of our, I would say like maybe competitors at the time, but honestly, someone that was like also in the space and like trying to figure out how they could expand into what we were building, saw that. And we're like, oh my God, this would be the best of all worlds, because they wanted the technology that we were building, the customers that we had, and the community and the other artifacts that we had built, and to actually further their product roadmap. And we wanted a good home for our customers to go to. So it's sort of, we weren't even expecting it. We hadn't reached out to this company from sort of like a partnership or an acquisition perspective before. And it sort of came out of the blue after we'd already told our customers, hey, you should look for alternatives. But it was sort of a happy story, because that customer and that company ended up driving a lot of the sort of next steps. Yeah.
That's super awesome. And then ultimately the company ended up buying you guys, and you were acquired.
Yeah, totally. Because they wanted basically all this stuff, that this is literally what their roadmap was going to be for the next year.
And you moved somewhere different now, right? You're at Glean now. So was the acquisition not based on a need to stay of the founding team, sort of to help transition the technology? Did you want that, or did you not want that? How did that work out?
Yeah, so I can only speak for myself. I didn't want to retain the flexibility to do what I wanted with my time, because the reason we were looking for alternatives was to figure out how to maximize impact. And for me, that translated to being closer to AI and data first, versus a specific industry. So that's kind of what I personally had wanted. And it turns out that the company was actually also more interested in like the product and the customers and the IP. So it was actually the best of all worlds, that we didn't actually have to go with the acquisition. It's all worked out for everyone.
It's interesting now you're talking about it. I mean, there's so many levels that need to connect for this to work as you want it to. Like, I didn't think about all the different ways you need to be like, yeah, that's a match. Because it could have come to the end of it and they could have been like, well, actually, we need you to stay for 2 years. And you're like, that's a deal breaker. And so, it's kind of...
And I've heard of founders who I've had people in my life who are founders who they got acquired and they had like the golden handcuffs, and they broke the golden handcuffs at some point, because they're like, you know what, I could spend my time elsewhere, and, the money part of it is meaningful, but like also the time part is more important.
Yeah, totally. And I would do it if it was in the service of the team. I think if we were all going to one place and like our team's jobs depended on the founders also joining, I would do it. And I think that wasn't the only condition under which I would do something I didn't want to do.
Yeah, that makes total sense. But yeah, since we're shifting gears a little bit into what's going on now, or where you've been, you've been, it looks like for the last 6 months or so at Glean, which if you haven't heard of it and you're listening here, is one of the super hot AI companies out there today, based in Palo Alto. Are you all still in Palo Alto, or based in Palo Alto? I remember very clearly in my days at Notion, Glean was a company we were really, and still probably the case. I'm not there anymore, so not speaking for them, but we were definitely taking a very hard look at, because a lot of what y'all do is make it really easy to surf across all of your enterprise applications and find things. And you make that process of taking unstructured data, call it a PowerPoint or a PDF or something like that, and surfacing it to the user, even if they don't know exactly where to find it. They can just search and find things, which aligns very much with the mission of what Notion was doing. So I had an eye on Glean even in those days, and y'all made an appearance in a lot of my accounts.
Vivek, can I also ask you, Vivs, does this align really well with Blackbird too, which you were working on, way back? That Blackbird feels like something that was doing something similar.
Blackbird, in their early infancy of the company, were trying to build Glean, but it was too early for that. I think the tech wasn't there yet that allows, and it also like the level of adoption that you have in terms of connectivity between apps, interoperability between apps that we have today wasn't there at that time as much as it is today. So they pivoted. They pivoted and ended up building an e-commerce search and recommendation product using NLP and computer vision, which we ultimately sold to Etsy. And if you use Etsy's search now, a lot of the foundational work done on Etsy's search and recommendation product are the applications of that technology that Blackbird they acquired from Blackbird. But yeah, Blackbird was kind of in that similar space for a second, but then pivoted.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, Glean. So Glean, Jesika, does Glean interact with any number of websites? It's an AI agent you're building that someone can go to a website, and Glean is sort of a layer on top to help interact with that commerce website.
So what Glean does is, the way it started was, there's a bunch of very distinguished engineers from Google that asked hey, I can search for anything in my personal life. Why can't I search for anything that is in my professional life inside my company's document database? And because they had spent so much time doing this for consumers, they sort of had a lot of the insights that are needed to make something like this work. And what you would do with Glean is basically imagine, you are at a company, you use Slack, you use Google Docs, you use Jira for task management, you might use Notion for, again, a wiki, other things as well. And then you need sort of this layer to, where was that thing that talked about this? How do I know what's my organization's PTO policy? Unless you know exactly where to go, you would rather just ask someone. So it's sort of your helpful friend that's always beside you, where you can ask questions to it. The initial use case was enterprise search because there is a lot of unstructured data in the enterprise, and no one had made a lot of good sense of it. And it's really challenging to do because, sort of as you're saying, that it needs one connectivity to all of these apps individually, right? And there's just a long roadmap of things to just build out connectors to, which Glean quietly and systematically did over the last few years, where the spotlight was not on them. And then once they had this set of connectors, you have to be able to make sense of it when a user asks a question and be able to reference the right document. And then kind of what Glean realized is that you can help people beyond just search. And, with the work assistants, you can actually help them not just find the right document, but, understand that document, create new documents, correlate that with other information that comes from different places, automate processes. There's a lot of stuff you can do on top of data that you have at an enterprise, particularly if you have access to data across a lot of different sources of truth. So that's kind of, at least how I can't speak for the whole company, seeing Glean evolved.
So what are you working on there now?
I currently work on structured data initiatives at Glean. So there's, the initial part of what made Glean very special was a lot of these unstructured connectors. And now we're realizing, hey, to actually automate work, your data can live in a lot of other places. They can live in files that are CSVs and spreadsheets and tables inside of PDFs. We now have the technology to actually automatically write code, parse those files, write code, and then extract certain information for you. A lot of the kinds of connectors like Salesforce, Jira, those are the types of things that have sort of even if you don't think of it as structured data, if you ask a question, how many tickets did I close this quarter? Or how many opportunities did I close this quarter as a salesperson? It actually is a structured data query. That's really hard to answer otherwise. And so those are the types of sort of things that I'm building, and also our connectors to databases, warehouses, BI tools. So in some ways, it's not really a surprise because as a company that wants to connect to all enterprise data, we have a long roadmap there to cover. But we're excited about the possibility of just augmenting all that unstructured data, adding more structure to it, and answering questions for end users.
Yeah,
super exciting.
Can I tell you, I was completely bamboozled by something because, and I apologize for asking you a slightly incorrect question about what Glean does, because I searched for Glean and I'm like, okay, Glean AI. And the first sponsored link in Google is Glean with 2 E's. Glean AI. And Glean AI is a chatbot that helps users shop on e-commerce websites using natural language. And so if you search for your company in Google, they've co-opted your link to go to their website.
Yeah, this is a fairly common growth marketing hack.
Is it? Okay. Well, they got me. So I'm sorry about that.
Interesting.
That's why my
No, it's
question probably made no sense. I was like, oh man, I've completely misstated the company.
No.
no,
It's good that you cleared it up, though.
Yeah.
And also, I was going to make a sort of a separate point, which is that based on the track record of the name Arvind should found an AI company because Glean founder is named Arvind. Perplexity founder is named Arvind. So
I thought you were going to say something different, Viz, which is based on how bad I am at spelling. This error is completely predictable.
Oh my God. Arvind, when are you starting your next AI company?
Okay, yeah. Let's think of something together that I can do, which doesn't require a ton of coding, but has like a physical
or spelling for that
or spelling
matter.
exactly.
or spelling, yeah.
That really threw me off in coding, probably too. You know, I'm getting all these syntax
Well,
errors.
nowadays you just use one of these AI,
Yeah,
whatever
I'd
cursor
come
or
along
something.
now. You know, if only. You know, it's funny. I studied EECS at Berkeley. Could have totally done CS. Didn't really do it at all. So it was very much possible. It was there. It was.
That's right there. But I actually do think it is. I kid you not. I have been an engineer, so I was cheating a little bit, but I literally used some of Glean's public APIs and the Glean bot assisted to actually like produce a hackathon project in an afternoon, this past December, that we're now like shipping as a product this quarter. And like, it is wild, right? Like, I do agree. Like, I understand technology. I understand coding. So I had a little bit of an advantage there, but as a PM, I didn't have to touch the Glean code base to actually like build a feature.
That's
which is
cool.
Crazy.
That's cool.
You know?
Yeah.
So if you need some inspiration, there it is.
What do you think that means for the future of folks coming out of college who've studied coding?
I honestly think that the best get better. I don't think that the best like are threatened. I mean, I personally don't think that it would be threatening because complex systems always need to be built in a way that like, today humans can do a much better job than I can. You're always going to need something that like computers don't necessarily have. Computers have been really great. Like LLMs have been really great at like generating like specific types of code when asked a very specific kind of question. But that is also, I would say, like new grad level work that can be automated and should be automated. So if you get past that, then you get to do all the fun things. You get to think about all of the scaling problems and the better UX for customers and end users. So I personally think that this is a really exciting opportunity for us all, no matter who we are. Having graduated, you can just do so much more so quickly.
But you got to kind of step your game up. I guess if you were talking to a college grad now, you'd be like, don't do like website design type coding or something. You need to be on like maybe the fundamental, maybe algorithmic level, or you need to be breaking ground on, sort of like the theory side of things might be where there might be more interesting problems to be solved than the physical coding of something.
Yeah, totally. And I would say also just to be a stellar employee in the workspace, in the workplace, I feel like there's so many like fine, like soft skills that like, again, are not replaceable at all, right? Like, so I honestly wish like that, like if we can get some of the like boring stuff out of the way, we can teach kids how to collaborate, how to negotiate, how to do all these other things that like we just learn the hard way in the workplace.
Yeah.
It's a great point. And now with a lot more introductory work being remote, I do find that transition to be a lot harder. I think there was so much to be learned from the in-person interactions of work that it is hard when you're I would encourage anyone who's starting work to try to be in person more if possible. And I say that, right now being a partly hybrid worker, but like even for me, I just find I'm more effective in person at work if I can be. So, yeah.
Totally. 100%.
Yeah, and I remember when humans are really, really adaptable, right? But when we first went into the COVID lockdowns, especially here in the Bay Area, it was very strict and people who were non-essential were staying home. And it was really actually pretty hard to deal with being fully remote. But we're so adaptable that we sort of got used to that lifestyle. And I think in where we're at today, we've now been maybe a couple years after COVID, and you're seeing a trend towards people wanting to be back in person, or at least management wanting people to be back in person. But we've adapted so well to hybrid or, stay at home work from home, then it's kind of hard to go back, and we're gonna have to readapt back to the old world in some ways.
Yeah, no, totally. I agree. Like the world is going to throw a lot of curveballs at us and is throwing them already. But I think like everyone is like humans are very resilient and we'll figure out ways to keep ourselves busy. Like I'm not worried about it. And I'm so excited by like all of the boring stuff is like it's very close to being automated. And I've spent basically the better part of this last decade, like basically trying to make data work harder than people. And we're here, right? Like, we're almost there.
So like we get over that hump, and then what happens? I don't know, in your perspective, what's the next 5 to 10 years look like after that? Is it just transformational? Like what changes in a crazy way?
To me, a lot of the boring stuff changes. A lot of the things change. Like in my personal life, I want to be able to automate my like grocery shopping. I want to be able to, if I'm a sales engineer, I want to automate like RFP filling. Like there's things that like I don't get a lot of value from doing that I don't find enjoyable, and I wouldn't get paid a ton of money to do it if that was the only thing I was doing. I see no reason to do that.
Yeah. You're almost making the case for like, actually people think this is going to be like crazy. It's suddenly going to be a different world, but it's actually like, it's going to remove a bunch of incremental things in a way that's going to be almost seems seamless, where it's like, good, glad that's gone. I don't have to think about it. Okay, let's get 10% more time in my day to do something else, 10% more time in my day to do something else. Like that's the way it's going to transition until the point where like, oh, I get to focus mostly on things I want to focus on.
Yeah, that's right. Like I might then write better PRDs if someone writes the first draft for me. Someone challenges my assumptions. So I truly like, I'm excited for a world where I have like a personal sort of omniscient being all around me, like a combination of a higher deity and a mother and like all of those things are like right by my side at all times.
Wow.
That's great.
Very, very optimistic take.
A higher
I love that.
deity, huh? A worshiping AI, worshipable AI. That's interesting.
But there's like, actually it's so interesting because like sometimes there's use cases for like mental health as well, right? When someone's like sad, today, I don't know what they turn to, but if there is something to put faith into,
Jesika, it's happening faster than you might think. I actually just spoke to a founder yesterday who is basically building an app that will be your therapist. And I think there's many people are trying to solve this, right? And I think like even if it doesn't replace therapy for people who really want and seek therapy, I think it's a good outlet for people who want to give it a try. Like, oh, maybe I'm feeling really down in the dumps about something and I need someone to bounce ideas off of or get it off my chest. Something. This could be a first avenue towards that.
Like a freemium therapy model. You get on the chatbot, and then if you want the upgrade, you pay.
Yeah, you want the. I mean, it's actually really hard to find like a therapist. It's like they're in really high demand, especially during COVID. Or we even at Notion we had this service that allowed you to find someone, and even in the case that you had something like that, it was really hard. Like we heard stories of people like I tried, and it's too in too high demand. And there's not enough people to be on the other side. So
totally. And if you're sad in the middle of the night, what do you do? Right? Like those are the types of, it's just increasing liquidity for every single amenity that we have in modern day life. And then like the more you can automate the bot aspect of what you do as a human, the more human-like you can be.
Interesting.
So maybe I'm going to push back a little bit, because I think that there is like like today I think that there's like entire jobs that can be replaced by just the current status of LLMs, right? Like especially like one that I was talking to Arvind about earlier is just like I feel like there's a bunch of like marketing related things that like used to have copywriters, or you still have copywriters, I'm sure, in some businesses. Like that's probably no longer going to be a job for long, right? You can tell an LLM to, in the style of, I don't know, in the style of Don Draper from Mad Men, write me a ad campaign for XYZ, and it will like give you that. Make it shorter. I want 150 words. I want 500 words. 10 seconds. You've got it. What do you think about that? Like, does that just a little bit of a challenge to what you were saying? But how do you feel about that? Does that ring true to you?
Yeah, I mean, but I would imagine that the best marketers take that as an exciting opportunity to run more experiments, right? Like even being able to tell the LLM what to do. For what it's worth, data engineering is going to be a huge job because English will be, it's not like we're replacing coding, we're just like replacing that with like English,
Yeah.
right? So there's like opportunities there to like showcase your creativity and the types of prompts you come up for these LLMs. There's opportunities to showcase your creativity in the types of experiments you run, in the
Yeah.
like surfaces that you are now able to show your ads on because you're not spending all your time copywriting.
And I've found myself like maybe there's a flip side of this, which is that, you know, the more human your ad campaigns are, the more successful they'll be or something, right? Like the more human feeling, like, more like it feels like it's made by a human or it's verified made by a human. That'll actually get people more excited than something that was created by AI. And I've already found myself like, you know, like I used to like proofread my emails and like make sure that I had, you know, made sure that all of the like punctuation was in the right place and the spelling errors were corrected. I've now tried to stop doing that as much because like it's more human to just send the email with some errors in it.
You know, this is like so interesting because there's this whole thing with like clothes, right? Our clothes used to be all handmade by tailors.
Right.
And then now they're mass made and now you pay a premium for handmade clothes.
Yeah.
Great example. Great example. It's a really good way to think about it. I mean, that feels to me like the direction that is the most optimistic still. And it feels like it could become a creativity unlock for a lot of people. Like we were talking about earlier, it's like I think we lived in a pretty free society, nomadic when we were like nomadic, but it was very, you know, very unsecure. And then we sort of went into this farming culture and became locked into this cycle of needing to do these things in order to produce enough food. And we're like, almost, this is the tail end of it almost. It could be seen as where we re-unlock our time in a way, but in a much more secured way. Like we've come to secure a lot of the things that were unsecure when we were nomadic, but we're not forced into the same sort of cultivator trade-off anymore that we used to be in. I don't know. It's very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I certainly hope so. I mean, I do think there's like, when you said security, like there's definitely a lot of stuff we have to figure out, right? Like
security. Yeah. Just generally security wise. Yeah.
Yeah. So that could be like another 100 hours when we talk about security in the face of LLMs. But I think overall, I certainly think that there's going to be plenty of work for us to do. And like even LLMs are going to need a lot of direction. Like if you actually try like writing copy, it's going to be almost great, but to stand out, like marketing is about standing out, for example.
Standing out is hard. Yeah.
You'll figure out.
You can sort of tell when something was written by AI or like made by AI.
Yeah.
Although, like, have you guys seen the latest like Pika video generation stuff? It's actually kind of insane. Like, I know you probably have to go soon, but Pika is like this AI lab doing video creation, video AI generation. Like they just launched something new, and like this is all AI, right? Like you have.
This is crazy.
Oh my God.
Crazy shit.
Look at the fidelity on this. It's just amazing. Oh, that's scary.
Isn't this insane?
This is wild.
Well, this goes back to our Madhulika conversation, Vivs, with the acting and movie kind of industry.
That's what I'm saying. But it probably costs like $1,000 to produce like 3 minutes of this video or something crazy.
Well, not for long.
Not for long.
I know, not for, especially with DeepSeek at the helm.
That's right. Funny, I actually have a friend who also went to MIT, sold her company, but she started a company and sold it, and now is doing like directing stuff. And she uses AI for a lot of the like sequences where like, say it's an action sequence, you just need like thousands of soldiers, right? Like, so you don't need a lot of like likeness, you know, so those types of things. And she was telling me how a lot of the OG directors are obviously not like into it because they want the like, they care about the craft. But it enables a lot of people like her who don't have that much budget to like produce a full feature film that, you know, is going to be shown at Sundance, like, you know, those types of things.
Yeah. And by the way, that used to be really high budget, right? Like if you had to get CGI into your movie, like that was really expensive back then. Now it's going to be way cheaper to do that, right?
Yeah.
And we all remember those days when there was bad CGI. Like you're like, oh, that's clearly just not real.
That's right.
Yeah, maybe that's how AGI will be. We'll be like, oh, that's clearly not human. But
it'd be like watching something made by a whale or something. You know, it's like a different species of thing has made this. You know?
I love that. Yeah, I mean, but I do think that at some point with human, but even if all it does is it gives us a first draft, that's like it'll take us so much further, right?
Yeah.
It'll make everyone better. So I know we're at time, but it's been so fun speaking with you, Jesika. Thanks for agreeing to chat with us and do this. We'll be in touch later and we'll talk, and maybe we'll even have you on again at some point in the future. And like so excited that we were able to make the connection and for you to come on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for doing this. This was a fun chat. And I listened to the one with Helen and Keerthi a little bit. Keerthi, I also went to college at the same time.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Did you know her at all?
Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
In class, but yeah, I knew her.
Yeah, we've known her for a long time, like since we were kids. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember she said you all went to elementary school together.
Yeah, and I was her brother's like tennis partner, and we lived together in college and all this stuff. So we know her very well.
Keerthi's brother and husband are part of our college friend group.
It's a weird sentence to parse. That is a complicated sentence.
So, okay. Keerthi's husband.
Yeah, I think people got it.
He's a different person.
Yeah, we got it.
Yeah.
No need to explain. Let's take a second.
Wait, well, are y'all based in San Francisco or?
Yeah.
And we are planning. So for everyone out there who has been on the pod and is listening, which is most of our listeners, we are hoping to have at some point, manifest like people of the pod, people that have been on
friends of the
pod, like happy hour or something like that. So stay tuned.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It was great meeting you and talking to you, Jesika. Yeah.
Yeah, likewise. But y'all have a great rest of your day.
Have a great day.
Too.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.